Well, Luke, David Lynch, author drawn to the dark and the dreamlike, dies at 78. That's what the Hollywood Reporter is saying. Sounds like fake news to me.
Yeah, it also said that from that article you're reading from the Hollywood Reporter that the Twin Peaks return from 2017 was critically panned or wasn't well reviewed.
Oh, really? So that is fake news?
Well, which is the exact opposite, yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. Do you think they'd have any reason to lie, or do you think they're just idiots?
For internet clout, some traction for the article.
Okay, that's pretty alpha, actually. I respect that.
Yeah, but it's just such a weird thing to say when obviously he's just died, and it's not true.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
Yeah, but Twin Peaks, the original TV series from the 90s, of course I've watched that, and I've said before, it's an incredible TV show up until you find out Laura Palmer's murder, or who murdered Laura Palmer. But the first episode is one of the best episodes of TV I've ever seen, and it may be the best opening episode to a TV series ever. What a great, director! What a great artist!
Yeah, what a great auteur!
Why was that funny?
Just because it's what it says in the article, and
Okay, fine.
So that makes it funny, right?
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Select and Reflect, the movie review podcast where we look at films that have come out in the near and distant past, we give them a couple of watches, and we evaluate them beyond first impressions. I'm your host Michael, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Luke, and this week we are celebrating the forthcoming Oscars by looking at the Best Picture nominees from last year's Oscars. Last week we looked at the films which were nominated for Best Original Screenplay, and this week, we're looking at the films that were nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay. That's how we've decided to divide them up. So, Luke, are you excited about reviewing 4 movies?
Wow, you sound so enthusiastic. But yeah, no, I am. But just to clear something up, we're looking at the movies that were nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay today, that were also nominated for Best Picture.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Because last week, we did the Best Original Screenplay nominees, but left out May, December, because that was not nominated for Best Picture, but the other 4 were. And today we're reviewing 4 movies, which again were nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Picture, and we're leaving out, I think it was Oppenheimer, because we've already reviewed it, and also Barbie. In fact, actually, one of these movies was not nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay.
So not nominated for Best any kind of screenplay?
It was Killers of the Flower Moon.
Okay, that I can see that.
Yeah. Which was nominated for Best Picture, but not nominated for any of the screenplay, awards. But it is an adapted screenplay, of course. It's an adaptation from a book. So we are going to get in. Well, last time, of course, we started with the winner of the Best Original Screenplay from last year's Oscars, which was Anatomy of a Fall. Which movie won Best Adapted Screenplay, Michael?
Which movie won Best Adapted Screenplay? I literally can't remember.
It was
okay.
It was American Fiction.
Yes.
And American Fiction is boring, so we're actually going to do the reverse of what we did last week. We're going to talk about the movie which was not nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay first, and then at the end, the last movie we're reviewing will be American Fiction, and in between we're going to do Poor Things and The Zone of Interest. So yeah, there we go, that's the order. So shall we get into Killers of the Flower Moon, Michael?
Yes, Luke, let's do it.
So, Killers of the Flower Moon is a 2023 American epic anti-western. See that?
I prefer Uncle Westerns.
It's an anti-western crime drama film co-produced and directed by Martin Scorsese, who co-wrote the screenplay with Eric Roth, and it's based on Killers of the Flower Moon by David Gran. It stars Leonardo DiCaprio, Robert De Niro, and Lily Gladstone. It was released on October the 20th, 2023, in the United States, and also, of course, was an Apple Films original. And yeah, Michael, can you guess what the budget was for Killers of the Flower Moon?
Yes, I can. It was 30 million.
What?
I literally, Luke, you think that I'm like smart? I literally don't even know if I've gone. I mean, I'm assuming I've gone really high. So
why would no? It's 3 hours and 20 minutes. It features Leonardo DiCaprio.
Oh, it's okay. Okay, good. So I was okay. That's fine then. I'm happy about that. So 50 million.
Fuck you
60 million.
200 million to 215 million.
That's a lot of money.
It's like it was so long and had so many actors in it.
Yeah, sometimes I don't know to what extent like the length fully relates to how like much a film costs.
Do you see? Do you
Because
see
it's
how
like if anything,
good,
they save money on an editor.
do you see how good the production design was as well?
Yeah,
I mean,
I just assume that's what like a lot of places in the US still look
but
like.
God, so we're off to a great start here. You're just not thinking. So, what about the box office?
So I don't know.
This was released in theaters first, by the way.
This was released in theaters first.
Before it was on Apple original. Well, Apple TV, sorry.
Now, can you tell me the length of time between when it was released in theaters and when it was released for streaming?
Yeah, like a few weeks.
Okay, a few weeks. Oh God, I'm gonna say this made 140 million.
Great guess. Great guess.
Oh, we're off to a good start. See.
Yeah, you've locked in. It's 158.8.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So yeah, it didn't make its money back unless all those Apple subscriptions.
Anyway, Michael, did you like Killers of the Flower Moon? And I already know what you're going to say, by the way, but say it anyway.
Oh, do you know what I'm gonna say?
Yeah, you're going to repeat another reviewer who you like to copy. Take inspiration from.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's really funny because yeah, you are right. This person does completely agree with me. Yeah, this movie was so boring. Yeah, like so it's kind of funny because you were like, oh, American Fiction, that's boring. So you put this movie first. This movie, look, I absolutely thought this. It just so happens he agrees with me, but I absolutely when I was watching this movie, I felt. I don't like that this movie feels like it warranted taking up this much of my time. The first time I watched it, I was really ill, which was kind of good because it was a good time to be watching a 3-hour and a half movie. And also it kind of made me more invested in the woman who was being poisoned.
Okay.
But this time I was completely healthy. Like this time.
So this is the second time you've watched it.
Yes, and this time I had a more negative opinion of it. I was like, man, when I'm not delirious from sickness, this movie is much worse. So I didn't really like it.
You didn't like it, okay. So yeah, I think that this movie it's funny because, like I mentioned in the Wikipedia summary of it, it's an anti-Western. So what are Westerns normally? What happens in the Western genre?
So one thing that happens, especially in a stereotypical Western, is that the Injuns, as I believe they're called, get killed by the cowboys. But they're kind of heroes.
Not all the time.
That is true. That's not all the time. Yes,
the best Western ever, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, doesn't feature any Indians.
Yes.
So what is a common? I'm not talking about the events. If you were to describe a Western, what usually happens.
Well, I mean, usually it's about like an outlaw, someone who's some kind of, or maybe a lawman.
You're describing events like when you expect to see a Western, what are the emotions you're expecting to?
Like heroism.
Yeah, maybe.
Or maybe like kind of what's the word? Like a kind of an adventurous spirit.
Yes.
Adventure.
Okay. Right. We're getting there. Adventure. Right. So what does that lead to?
Adventure leads to excitement.
Yes. There we go.
Oh, I see. I get what you're. So you're being clever here, aren't you?
Why am I being clever?
Oh, I thought you were going to say like a Western leads to excitement, whereas this movie's an anti-Western, therefore it's not exciting.
Well, yeah, that's what I am going to say. I don't know why that's me being clever.
I just thought it was like because I didn't. Well, it was clever to me because I didn't expect you to say that. I mean, like I worked out where you were going, and because really I was just saying I was clever for working out where you were going.
All right, fine, great. Well, the point is that yes, it is an anti-Western, and Westerns, the whole shoot 'em up. There's gunfights. There's the tension. There's the drama. When two cowboys, I guess, pull the pistols on each other. I'll see you at noon or whatever.
Yeah, and there's two kinds of people in this world: those with guns and those who dig.
Yeah. So there's a lot of and this is why the genre was so popular for like 20 years in America, because it's exciting. There's a lot of shoot 'em ups. I saw on TV yesterday. It was Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and I wasn't watching it, but I walked in to see it on the TV, and yeah, they were in a gunfight. There was. Everyone was shooting everyone, and that is a Western. This is an anti-Western, so you don't see any of that. So you don't see any of the drama. You don't see any of the excitement. There is no tension really in this movie, apart from the tension between. Well, I said there's no tension. There is no dramatic tension like you would see in a Western. There is tension between, I guess, Molly and Ernest, particularly. Like Molly's thinking, what's Ernest's whole deal, and Ernest is thinking about, what should I do here? And it's character-driven tension rather than action, and therefore you can look at this movie and I'm not surprised you were bored by it, because it's incredible, really, that what Martin Scorsese has attempted to do is make it boring. I think that's what he's tried to do. He's tried to strip the drama out of it, so you're just left with the harsh reality of what happened to the Osage people. And that is an artistic choice which does make the movie not as entertaining, but I respect it, and because it's making a larger point overall. And I think, again, considering Martin Scorsese, what is he known for?
Like gangster movies.
He is known for like crime dramas, which are exciting, which are tension-filled, which have action in them, and he's just done the exact opposite here, and that's why this movie is so interesting. Not really because what happens, but the creator and what the overall point.
Yes, the old meta thing.
Yes, exactly, and so that's why I'm intrigued by this movie. It's an incredibly interesting movie if you actually look at the bigger picture and not just what happens within the movie. And I appreciate, obviously you didn't do that and other people haven't done that, but I like to do that, so therefore I found it intriguing. So, how many nitpicks do you have?
I don't have any nitpicks, although I will reveal there is one movie here that I did write a nitpick for.
Okay, good. I don't have any either, so let's get into the plot.
Yeah, there just wasn't. If it was a few hours longer, I would have found something to nitpick. Anyway, so set in 1920s Oklahoma, Osage tribal members retain oil rights on their reservation, but a corrupt local political boss seeks to steal the wealth and take their lives until the FBI steps in to unravel the mystery. Yeah, that's kind of funny because obviously the FBI, they don't step in until ages into the film.
Until 2 hours into it.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy. I will say, I didn't know anything about this, so, this movie, I guess it at least gets what I call the old documentary points, in the fact that, I actually didn't know anything about that there were these Indians who had this whole, oil thing, and then obviously all this stuff happened. That's, the way it kind of starts off is, where it shows, hey, look, this tribe, they're, super... rich. You're like, I didn't know that happened. Well done then.
yeah. Well, it's very interesting, and again, their story hasn't been told, to a mass audience, which is why Scorsese, I think, was so interested in making this movie. But yeah, it's funny. The original book that this is based on focuses on the FBI and the guy that Jesse Plemons plays. I forget his name, but the FBI guy. He was initially going to be played by DiCaprio, and it was going to be, a
white savior.
Yeah, kind of, but also what's actually happening. He's going to unravel the mystery. But that's the thing; the mystery really isn't unraveled in this movie. So that line, I don't think is accurate. It's just kind of a slow-paced, quite undramatic movie, which has these horrible killings every so often. And I think that would mirror what happened in real life. Just the slow death, which the Osage can't do anything about it. There's a lot of subtlety as well. And I was going to say, you really do need to see this movie twice, I think, to really get everything. But you have and still don't like it, so that's great. I do think at the end of the movie, when the trial happens, things get better because just the trial is inherently more dramatic. And that's what I thought when watching it for the first time. When the trial starts, it's like, okay, yeah, now we're getting into gear. Now it feels like a more normal movie, I can understand why Scorsese didn't want that for the first 2 hours, and it's quite what he's trying to do here. Again, it's quite thematic. Honestly, it's quite meta. Ernest Burkhart could be a stand-in for your average white American, and then De Niro is a stand-in for this white supremacy. Honestly, that kind of leads somebody like Burkhart to do the things that he did in pursuit of course, money and wealth and everything. And you can look at things like that, and then it gets interesting. But
it's not firing on all cylinders, except metally. Anyway, so we'll proceed with the script. Several Osage members find oil gushing from the ground. The tribe becomes wealthy as it retains mineral rights. However, the law requires court-appointed white legal guardians to manage the money of full and half-blood members, assuming them incompetent. Now, I personally think that this was actually a bad thing that was done to the Native Americans.
Yes, but I do like how, what you said before about how, you didn't know this stuff happened. Okay, they get this money, this oil money, but they're not actually allowed to have it because they're incompetent for some reason. It's incredible the racism they still suffered despite the oil that they managed to get. They didn't even fully get that money. You have this concept as well in the movie. Speaking of money, which is Osage prices. They're overcharged for everything.
Oh yeah,
And,
yeah.
Yeah, I just like all these details about how racist life was for them is splintered throughout the movie. And yeah, I like the character of John Ramsey. You know that guy, the skinny guy.
Yes.
Yeah, who hangs out with this Native American Henry Roan, he's called, and just pretends to be his friend just before casually shooting him.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's a great, metaphor for a lot of the people in the town. But yeah, even when these Native Americans play by the rules of the white man, they just get fucked over, which is unsurprising, of course. But yeah, just even in this scenario, they're getting screwed over. Even when they have this much money, still it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Although to be fair, like I could have predicted that for them. Like I'm like there's no way that the US is just gonna let Native Americans have a whole load of money.
Yeah.
Like even if you're a whole ocean away, they're not gonna let you have loads of money from your oil.
Yeah. I have thought of another name for the title. I mean, Killers of the Flower Moon it's a good title. But I thought of a good name. I don't know if you think it's good.
Okay.
Rigged.
Because of oil rigs
Yeah.
and also the system's rigged.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good one. I feel like that would make for a good comedy version of this movie.
Why?
I don't know. Like I could just imagine like some guy like kind of like standing next to an oil well and maybe like shrugging like and like rigged.
Yeah. Well, Rigged is shorter.
Yes.
So yeah, I think it would have.
I think they should change the title to Fuck.
Okay.
That's my thoughts.
That's good. That'll come back later.
Yes.
So yeah, what happens next?
So in 1919, Ernest Burkhart returns from the war to live with his uncle, William King Hale. Hale poses as a friend to the Osage, but wants to take their money and head rights. I will say this. I personally found like Ernest Burkhart, some might use the word subtle, but I found it really difficult to actually like get an impression of his character. Because basically, I mean, I feel like his motivation is just that he wants money, which which obviously the raw simplicity of that is something to appreciate. But I wouldn't say he's a super compelling character, which is like one criticism that I have.
Well, that's the thing. He's not compelling for a reason.
Yeah,
which we'll get into later. But again, Scorsese, well, he's already had DiCaprio, hasn't he, in another movie? Well, he's in several movies, but one of them, the Wolf of Wall Street, that character is incredibly compelling. And you have the opposite here again, which is the point. But yeah, it's interesting. Let's speak about King Hale.
Yes.
Again, he just says to Ernest without any drama, oh yeah, you should marry Molly because she's full blood and that money will come to us.
Yes, I do like the fact he's just ranting about, we're just gonna kill people.
Yeah, again, well that's the thing. It's meant to be so undramatic. He doesn't say it in hushed tones, and there's not any tension. He just says, yeah, and that's what Scorsese wanted. That's the whole point of the movie. And Robert De Niro, I think, is so good in this role. I think the banality of evil is maybe a phrase we'll say later.
Yes,
but it kind of feels like he's that like personified, and yeah, like at one point he asks Ernest, "Can you really stand her kind?"
Yeah, I was thinking that like when he's just saying random like super racist stuff. And and the funny thing is like Ernest doesn't seem like super rabidly racist.
No.
So he's just like, okay, cool.
Well, he's meant to have no personality. I think
that's
he's just after money. So yeah, that's his point of his character. I mean, giving him a personality with Leo's charisma, that may be a problem, honestly. Because then, but yeah, he just says racist stuff so bluntly, just non-villain like, but obviously it is pretty bad. And yeah, I do wonder like what is Hale's motivation? Well, I did wonder that. But I think, the phrase manifest destiny.
Yes.
Like that phrase manifest destiny, if you want to explain it. But it is that distilled, I think. That is Hale,
Yeah, I mean, he says, like one of his justifications is he's just like, well, eventually the Indians, they're going to go away. Like he's kind of like treats them like they're the elves in Lord of the Rings. Okay. It's just like, they're not long for this world. Eventually their time's going to pass on. And like, so essentially it's kind of like, we might as well get our cut of the situation because like the white man's just going to get, end up winning in the end anyway. Yeah. Well,
it's just, that's destiny.
Yes.
That is what is going to happen.
It's destiny that has been manifested.
You can't change your destiny, Well, maybe you can add it. But the point is, it's just this is what's going to happen. And he doesn't say this is their destiny because maybe that would be too on the nose,
Yeah.
But yeah, that is the point, I think.
I would agree. Anyway, so Ernest and Byron, someone calls him Brian in this movie, commit armed robbery against the Osage. Yeah, so, I mean, they're just a bunch of thugs, aren't they?
Well, yeah, so what is really interesting when this happens is the movie asks, well, it poses a question, and it did in the trailer as well, which was a great trailer. Can you find the wolves in this picture? And we'll get into that in a bit, but yeah, I do like how when Leo says that, then he and his brother Byron, of course, him playing Ernest, go and rob the Osage, and it's kind of like a pack of wolves, honestly, the way they just gang up on them. I think that is literal metaphor. Like, can you find the wolves in the picture? And then they rob the Osage like a pack of wolves would go after, their prey. Let's talk about, who are the wolves in this picture, Michael? Of course,
the white man.
Well, because picture has two meanings, right?
Yes, a movie picture.
Yeah. So, well, it's it's not just the white man in general, although
not all white men. That's a good point.
That is a good point. Yeah, but the wolves are basically so many people in this town, and that's what Scorsese wanted to really communicate. It's like these wolves aren't good. Obviously, wolves are meant to be bad, right? They're meant to be killing their prey, and which is what of course the white people in this movie do to the Osage. And I mentioned a previous movie that Martin Scorsese and DiCaprio did. What was it?
Wolf of Wall Street, which has the word, I don't know if you noticed this, the word wolf in it.
Yes. So, but people don't think of, what's he called in that movie?
Jordan Belfort.
They don't think of him like Ernest Burkhart, do they? And of course, he didn't do anything as bad as what Ernest Burkhart did, but the character is not meant to be, admired, but he is. And he's saying, I think with this movie, look, this guy, Ernest, and a bunch of these other white people, you are not going to admire them. I'm going to make it quite clear who the wolves are, because you fucking morons, clearly, have no media literacy. And you think everybody, in my movies who, says some swear words and, has charisma, they're cool and should be idolized. There's this guy, I don't know if you know who you won't, he's called Joey Valentine. He won The Apprentice, and he's this TikTok business guy. And
I think I do know him.
Oh, good. Well, there's this TikTok of him showing like your sales people, like the Wolf of Wall Street, like the speech from, which says like, I'm not fucking leaving or whatever. And it's like, oh, you gotta, when you're selling someone, you gotta fuck them. I don't know, the kind of stuff he says in the movie.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, idolize this guy. This guy's great, yeah. And of course they don't understand. And I think in this movie, it's like, you are going to understand, who the bad guys are in this movie. You're not going to get it twisted,
Yes, yeah, I do appreciate it. I think, like, just to be capped in criticism, which I probably do need to do because, like I said, I don't really like this movie.
Go for it.
Obviously, the only thing is from the perspective of us as a viewer, we're heroes who did already know this guy was bad. So obviously, one can appreciate. And I think I agree with you. Yeah, like us too. We know that this guy's bad. So obviously on the meta level, he's saying to, like, hey, you got to get it clear. This guy's like a bad guy. And you can do that. The problem is, obviously, if let's say someone's like, oh, I like movies with kind of nuanced characters. And then someone comes along like, well, I'm going to make it really obvious this guy's a bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'd be like, okay, well, you've made it very obvious, but you have taken away a thing that ordinarily I would praise a movie for.
Yeah, but it's that's the thing. I don't mind that because of Scorsese's previous work. Like, it's a meta thing, Like, he's almost indirectly talking about his previous movies, and in this movie, which I think is fascinating, which is why I find it interesting. But yeah, what happens next?
Yes, so Ernest develops a romance with Molly, an Osage whose family owns oil head rights. Yeah, what I do like is that he seems, unless I'm being very stupid, he seems to on some level genuinely like her.
Yeah.
Which obviously, because later on you kind of get a further indication that on some level he actually likes her, which makes him slightly interesting. But yeah.
Yeah. Why do you think that Molly is okay with getting with Ernest? I want to ask you that question.
That's an interesting question. So on some level, because she kind of says that he's like, I think she calls him a coyote and basically like says that he's after her money. But I feel like she's kind of consigned herself to the reality that that's inevitably going to be the case, that no matter where she goes, there's always going to be someone like after her money, someone trying to steal from her. So she's like, screw it, I might as well just get with this guy because at least he's such a moron that I can kind of like keep an eye on him.
Not a moron though. I don't think she's thinking that. I think he's a coyote and not a wolf, like, he's not actually dangerous to me, coyotes are dangerous to like kids, but they're not. An adult can easily fend off a coyote,
yes,
because they're like smaller wolves who, aren't that dangerous, and that's
basically just little puppers.
Yeah, and also he already has money, and maybe with the fact that he's Hale's nephew. Oh, that's good because Hale's this powerful guy, so I'll be within their family, so that will be good. I'll get protected, or I won't get screwed over because of that. But
Good
obviously, the opposite kind of happens. But yeah.
Hale contracts the killing of multiple Osage. After Molly's sister Minnie dies of a mysterious illness, Hale orders Byron to kill another of her sisters, Anna. Yeah, so I think you kind of already hinted at this. It's quite just dispassionate and methodical, the way these people are just being like killed off. It's just like, yeah, this person died.
Yeah,
there's no like oomph to it.
Yeah, everyone's just so nonchalant, about it. Or him in particular, he's just like, yeah, of course we'll kill them. And you could maybe have a scene, where he lays it out and explains it, but I mean, I guess that would be too dramatic. I guess he really goes into the details and explains the master plan. He's just like, yeah, we'll get them, we'll kill them. And I think the fact that he's he's kind of blasé about it, and you say methodical, and I don't know if it is like methodical necessarily, because you don't know why. Like, why is Anna killed? Maybe because she is pregnant, although I'm not sure why that would make any difference. And I think it's meant to kind of replicate what the Osage were feeling. Just this person dies. Well, why has that happened? Like, there's no explanation given in the movie.
Yes. Anyway, Ernest makes an error, speaking of him being dumb, when hiring an assassin, so Hale punishes Ernest by paddling him in a Masonic temple. Even so, the law is in Hale's pocket, and a man seeking to lobby Congress for the Osage is murdered. Molly hires a private detective, but he is run off the reservation. Yeah, so this is just the moment where they try to resist it, and they're just not able to. Which it kind of, there's like an air of inevitability over what's happening in this film, which I think does take away from it being exciting, because you're just like, oh, there's like nothing they can really do to avoid what's happening, which of course, obviously on a meta level, for reasons you already communicated, does make sense.
Yeah, it increases the horror if it's just like, oh shit, we can't do anything about this. And obviously, it's things are subtle, and that's the worst thing when, from the Osage perspective, when, these things are just happening, you're trying to fix the problem and nothing's working, like, what is going on? I want to talk about when Molly is given insulin. Because, like, of course, this happens throughout the movie. She says, it's not working, but Ernest says it is. And I just wondered in that scene, like, is Ernest acting? Because he seems quite sincere, I'm talking about, when the doctors come and, he asks them to leave, and he's got, like, the medicine men won't fix you. This is real medicine, And
well, I don't know, because obviously at that point, is he poisoning her? Because the only thing I'm confused by is obviously there's a scene later on where, like, oh, you need to give her this extra thing too to slow her down, and it's implied that's the poison. So I'm not sure if she's actually being poisoned at that point.
Yeah, I don't know.
But obviously then she's like, oh, it's not working, so...
Yeah, so I don't know about that, honestly.
Yeah.
And also when Hale is upset at Molly getting pregnant, I'm just wondering, is he upset because he doesn't think that Ernest wants to kill her now? And he's like, oh, you've got her pregnant again? Do you not want to kill her? Or is he just that racist? He's like, oh, not another one of these kids.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think he's a racist. I know that's my controversial opinion. It might be that he wants to kill them so badly, because he is pretty into killing people.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the 1921 Tulsa massacre causes concerns amongst the Osage. Again, at Hale's behest, Ernest arranges the bombing of Molly's last surviving sister Rita and her husband Bill. Yes, there's a big explosion. Also, their maid or whatever dies as well. Let's not forget her, R.I.P.
Yeah, I don't know if you caught that, but when the house gets blown up, whatever the maid's name is, all the residents come rushing to the house, and it's like, oh shit, the maid. They say the maid's name over and over again, rather than Rita's name or even Bill's name. Because she's one of the white people.
Yes.
Yeah, which I like that touch. Did Ernest or Hale get inspiration from Tulsa? I assume that's why the Tulsa thing is in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do wonder as well, obviously, how much does the town know about what happens? Or what is happening? Well, I did wonder, because The Undertaker does. But obviously at the end, there's the shot when Ernest enters the room, in the Masonic temple, which is, very creepy and, meant to clearly evoke this, inherent darkness that's going on. And this is the center of this conspiracy, and you have these oil men who are involved in it as well. And you have fucking Brendan Fraser, he's there, and many of the other townspeople and the doctor as well, and they all turn around to look at Ernest, and it's a great shot, it really is. But that's how many people are involved, like probably maybe about 20-30 people. And so that's how many people know. So it is this like big, it's not just like, oh, only a couple people know, it's a gang of people. No, this evil was inherent in this town,
Yeah, which I mean makes sense because some might say similar evil was inherent in the United States in general. Like it's kind of like in some way you're like, oh wow, I can't even believe like the federal government even cares about this because like 50 years ago the federal government was actively genociding the Native Americans. I mean, probably even more recent than that, actively genociding the Native Americans themselves. So,
Yeah.
but I guess there's still laws. Sometimes you can be genociding someone and still want to maintain a sense of order because that's important. Anyway, Hale orders Ernest to poison Molly's insulin to slow her down. The thing about like Molly's situation is it is very depressing because I did actually say to my wife, who I'm not poisoning, because I was like, I'm watching a movie and I've got to say, I'm not thrilled in the process of watching it. And I was like, it's a 3-hour movie about a guy who's poisoning his wife. And like to me, like summarizing like that made it sound very very boring. But the thing is, obviously, it doesn't necessarily have to be. But yeah, just the fact that there's nothing she can kind of do about it because she doesn't recognize. Well, I think later on she does, but she's kind of just like, oh yeah, he's giving me this stuff, and it's almost like he's in denial about the fact he's doing it too.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's maybe the case with again white Americans in general. It's like Ernest is like, you have to ask, does he realize the end goal of all of this? And I think again for white America, coming into, Indian lands or Native American lands to be PC, and basically killing them. They wouldn't be like, oh yeah, no, we're genociders. We're not evil, but deep down, they know what's happening. And deep down, I think Ernest knows what they were doing because he's not that dumb, I think. But they just say slow her down so it doesn't sound as bad, but everyone knows what is actually going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Just by the way, so some Native American groups have said that they're perfectly fine with people using the word Indian.
That's great.
So I guess because like some of them are like, oh, Native American sounds kind of PC, which obviously they're not against, but it's like, oh, you're using all this PC language while we've still got loads of problems. So I can respect that's why I like to say Indians. That's why I like to say, I was going to say like like a slur, but I'm not going to do that. That would be funny.
The Washington football
exactly,
teams.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, go on.
Yes. Anyway, so FBI agent Thomas White, Senior, good old White coming to save the day, discovers the truth and arrests Hale and Ernest. Now, I like how very direct this is because it is kind of like, I mean, you already made a point of this. Right at the beginning, he does just show up and almost immediately solve the problem, which is kind of interesting in that it gets at the fact that the whole town was just being intentionally ignorant about it. Like the fact that he shows up, as soon as someone shows up, he's like, actually, I'm going to try and work out what's going on here. He works it out pretty much immediately.
Well, I mean, in the context of the movie he does, I don't think in real life that happened.
That can make sense, yeah.
But again, those can be different things. But yeah, we don't, that's the thing, we don't see how they really find out. The original movie or the book which the movie is based on, had a lot of that detail. And for instance, they track that guy, Kelsey Morrison, and they just explain how they got him. And it's just, again, very undramatic. And there's this great scene where he just says to his lawyer, if my adopted kids die, will I get the head rights?
Oh, yes.
And it's just so blatant. It's insane.
That's actually the best bit of the movie.
Yeah, well, again, that's what Scorsese has been doing in this movie, taken to the extreme. It just like leaves you kind of speechless. Like, okay, wow, that's the banality of evil there. And if I kill them, will I get the rights? So but again, the FBI don't unravel the mystery. They all meet up in a field, and then they just tell each other what they found out. And then it's like, okay, well, we've solved the case, boys. And again, there wasn't room for any of the FBI figuring stuff out, or maybe it was just pointless to do that, or maybe Scorsese was making a larger point about, no, it's about we're not going to focus on the FBI, we're going to focus on the actual killings.
White persuades Ernest to confess. Hale's attorney tries to convince Ernest to recant. Attorney, yes, I guess it's attorney. I just sometimes I when I'm really committed to reading, I just read things how they clearly should be pronounced. White persuades Ernest to confess. Hale's attorney tries to convince Ernest to recant. After his daughter dies, Ernest testifies wanting to be around for his family. Yeah, so this whole like power play situation here, it's fun. It reminds me of the Nuremberg trials.
Yeah, Brendan Fraser is so dramatic here.
Yeah, it's fun.
Speaking of dramatic, like the rest of the trial isn't. For instance, like again, Rita's death. We talk about just nonchalant, undramatic killings. Rita is just put up on a rock and killed, and it's just shot so flatly as well. Like just it's a matter of fact. He's just shot.
Yeah, they're pretty bored about it.
Yeah, and it's just again, you consider what Scorsese has done in the past with these killings, and it's quite different. These assassinations, I guess. But yeah, but that's why Brendan Fraser, I think, stands out so much. But yeah. Anyway, what happens with Molly?
So, Molly has recovered from her illness, but leaves Ernest after he refuses to admit to poisoning her. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, they always say, that's what women say. They say, you can poison me as long as you admit to it.
Yeah. Again, how much did Molly know? That's a question. When did she find out? And I do think there could have been a scene here, and this did frustrate me. Ernest having no agency and being dumb and only interested in money. That is one thing, but for Molly, of course, she's meant to be this more complex character, and let her have a scene where she suspects Ernest. Where she talks to one of her friends about it, because you don't really get a sense of what she thinks about the whole thing, and again, that could have been that could have been compelling in its own way, but also focusing on the Osage and what they were going through. So I think that would have been good, but we don't really know how much she knows. And she's just lying in a bed for like an hour, just sick, and again, it'd be good if she had some more interesting scenes, but
Yes, I would absolutely agree. Anyway, so just to wrap up, as indeed the movie does, a radio drama reveals Molly died at 50, with her obituary making no mention of the Osage murders. Yeah, so basically just explains everyone's situation, and I guess ends by saying someone needed to make this film.
Well, yeah, I mean, who does the explaining?
Martin Scorsese.
Yes, and Scorsese is the one who says this in his movie. He has this cameo at the end, and he's making a point, I think, and because these radio dramas did actually happen, and Scorsese could be looking at that and thinking, well, that's what I did, kind of dramatize these tragedies that weren't as severe as like a genocide, or at least a killing of like 30 innocent people, which is what I think what happened to the Osage. Like Goodfellas, they're just kind of killing other mobsters. They're not really. It's a different level of crime. But in the Wolf of Wall Street, he is fucking over a lot of people and getting away with it.
But he's not murdering them, so
yes,
again, essentially combines them together.
Yeah, it's not as bad. And maybe he feels, I don't know, bad about things. I'm not sure, because he thought, well, I'm not going to do a dramatization of this tragedy. I'm going to create an undramatic movie that focuses on these callous killings of the Osage. This is not Goodfellas at all. And he felt, well, I can't direct it like Goodfellas. I can't do that. And that's why he steps in and kind of, stops the drama at the end. There's this hokey radio drama which completely, neglects all the horrible crimes, with these cheesy sound effects, and he just steps in and stops that and just says the brutal truth of how Molly was treated and how these Osage were treated. And it's a repudiation of these kind of movies, and a repudiation, of course, of perhaps Westerns as well, which obviously, as you said at the start, focus on killing Indians, some of the time, and Indians were traditionally the bad people in these Westerns. And maybe it's a repudiation of his work, I mean, because that's the thing. The Irishman was kind of like that. It's like, oh, you think my mob movies are, feature people who you should aspire to be, Well, how about The Irishman, about this guy who just doesn't get anything but just kills a bunch of people, and he's really sad and lonely at the end. How about a mob movie which is just the complete opposite of, the glamour and the drama of my previous mob movies? And that was a kind of a repudiation of his work. And what about this as well? What about again, nobody wants to be Ernest. He isn't cool like fucking Wolf of Wall Street guy. It's a slow movie, and Molly's slow, painful, poisoning is focused on a lot. And yeah, he made a point doing this, and I think given his previous work, given his cameo at the end, I think he's trying to make this larger point, and I think it's fascinating that he is making this larger point. It would have been disrespectful to do like a FBI mystery movie about this tragedy, and therefore we have to make it undramatic. And it's, again, just given his previous work, it's interesting, and I definitely think him appearing at the end, he was making that point. But yeah, that's it. So shall we conclude?
Yeah, I am happy to conclude. So this here's the thing. Yeah, all the meta stuff I think is probably entirely accurate. But in talking about this film in summary, it probably sounds pretty good. But there is the experience of watching this film.
That is true, yeah.
Which I didn't enjoy. And the thing about it is, of all the movies we've watched this past year, this is probably the movie I would least like to watch again.
Okay, well,
and with that said, this is going to sound really brutal. I'm going to give this film a high 3. I don't mind what it did, but like when I'm like sat in a movie, I'm just like, I'm so bored, and I'm like that for a significant amount of time. I don't think I can say that I enjoyed the movie on balance, and yeah, there we go. That's it.
Look, man, I admire your courage in saying that, honestly.
Yeah, Scorsese, come for me.
But man, like that is horrendous.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, the one movie I was thinking about when I was watching is like, remember when I watched, what was it called? Any Given Sunday?
Yeah.
And I was just like, man, Luke, this movie was too long and too boring. And I gave it like a 2. And I was like, this movie is better than Any Given Sunday.
This is a lot better. Okay, so that's the thing. I mean, yeah, your attention span I've criticised before, but this is really, that's bad. A 3 out of 10, Jesus Christ. Because, I don't think it is too long, and it could have used a better script, and it could have used more compelling scenes, despite the great points Scorsese was making. It's still, like, not that bad. It's still, a 7 or a 7.5 out of 10. And I've actually put it as an 8.5 out of 10.
Oh,
because of what I think, he's trying to do and trying to say. It's just very interesting.
And you do have precedent for appreciating, like, the meta reality behind a movie.
Yes,
I think we've had several examples where you've been really into that, which I can totally respect.
Yeah, because again, it's not just a movie. It's not just like you got to think about what's going on, behind it, or why the director or the writer, Scorsese, I think maybe did both, why he wanted to make this movie, what he's actually trying to say, because it is like an expression of his views, and that's the thing, it's a very interesting and intriguing expression of his views. I just don't as well find it as boring as you clearly find it so boring, which I'm surprised at, because it is slow paced, but it's not that slow paced. Fucking hell, man, come on. There we go. Wow, that's maybe our biggest difference ever.
Right, anyway, with that said, let's get on to Poor Things. Luke, why don't you tell us a thing or two about Poor Things?
Yes, Michael. So, Poor Things is a 2023 film directed by Yorgos Lanthimos and written by Tony McNamara, based on the 1992 novel by Alistair Gray. So, yes, it's adapted from that novel, which came out over 30 years ago, also called Poor Things, by the way. It stars Emma Stone, who, of course, won the Academy Award for Best Actress for her performance in this movie, Mark Ruffalo, William Dafoe, Rami Youssef, Christopher Abbott, and Gerard Carmichael. It was released on December the 8th, 2023 in the US, about a month later in the UK. And can you tell me what the budget was for Poor Things, Michael?
No. So obviously there was like a lot of production stuff going on. Emma Stone, I imagine, commands a pretty penny, and I imagine one at Yorgos Lanthimos, off the back of The Favourite, doing quite well.
Yeah.
Maybe could have demanded more money.
Okay.
But I don't want to go crazy. Obviously, we've already established 200 million for a thingy. I'm gonna say 25 million.
Okay, good. Thank God. I thought you were gonna guess higher than your Killers of the Flower Moon guess.
No, I wasn't.
Christ. Yeah, so it's 35.
Okay.
You're like The Favourite. It's not that big. I don't know why you think.
Well, okay. So what I'm thinking of is I know lots of people were like, oh, I'm mostly thinking about Olivia Colman, like people being really into that.
Nobody knows who fucking Olivia Colman is, man.
I don't know. I feel like loads of people are like, oh, that Olivia Colman, isn't she lovely?
In this country, yes. Nobody knows who she is in America.
Okay.
People know who Emma Stone is, to be fair, but nobody knows who Yorgos Lanthimos is. Nobody can say his name properly. But yeah, what about the box office?
Less. I don't know.
It's not okay.
No, I don't know how much. I don't know. I literally have no idea how much this movie made. It made 50 million.
117.
I did not realize this film did. I didn't realize this film did that well at all. I would not have guessed that in a million years. Well done, this film.
Because it got good reviews. It was nominated for an Oscar and features Emma Stone. So yeah, it's probably going to do quite well. But yeah, it still maybe did a bit better than maybe you expected. Maybe I expected. But anyway, Michael, tell me you haven't copied another person who will remain nameless. Did you like this movie?
Well, first of all, I'm a gay Canadian. Second of all, I loved... No, I'm joking. This movie, I think, obviously, the main strengths of this... I'll say, yes, I did like this movie. It didn't leave some huge impression on me. I didn't love this movie with a capital Love. Obviously, the artsy stuff was good. The way the film left a very strong visual impression. And this is going to be a movie that I'll remember, and not for really negative reasons. But I don't know. I mean, look, the guy who you're mentioning, I think he said he was considering giving this movie a 10 out of 10.
Yeah,
and
so
consider
that's
it a masterpiece.
Yeah.
No, I didn't really think this film was a masterpiece. It didn't leave a massive impression on me at all, which is obviously something that's kind of surprising for a film this weird. It's kind of surprising that after I finished it, I was just like, yeah, that was a film.
Yeah, so I think that this movie was decent, and it's not very subtle. honestly. And speaking of subtlety, like the first movie we reviewed, it was quite subtle, which again I think is one of the reasons why you weren't a fan of it. And this movie is not subtle. The next movie we'll talk about is kind of subtle as well, but maybe not. And then the last movie, American Fiction, is incredibly unsubtle as well. I just find that funny how
we're bouncing back and forth.
Yeah, it's very obvious what this movie is trying to say with the whole women being oppressed, and then she's free at the end of the movie, and she goes through like this period of growing up, and it's just so on the nose, and therefore does this movie keep you entertained while it's making this point, while the metaphor is going on? Well, yeah, it kind of does. It sort of does. There's some decent scenes. The dialogue is quirky as always. It gets your attention. Kind of doesn't hit the same after a while, just like every Yorgos Lanthimos movie. But yeah, it's fine. I mean, I really didn't enjoy it that much, but it's still like a good movie. Again, the production design is incredible. I think Emma Stone is very good as well. But yeah, so let's get into the plot.
Yes, so brought back to life by an unorthodox scientist, a young woman runs off with a lawyer on an adventure across the continent. Free from the prejudices of her times, she grows steadfast in her purpose to stand for equality and liberation. I don't know about like standing for equality and liberation. Like, she doesn't become a full-on political thing, but yeah, kind of like you said, the movie, it's pretty obvious that's what it's about. Growing up unshackled by the expectations of society, she's she engages the world in a very different way, and perhaps functions as a living critique of how we're molded by arbitrary social expectations.
Yes, and how women in particular are.
Yeah, and there's also another message here which I think we need to bear in mind, which is that secretly babies want to have sex.
Okay, well, we'll get into that a bit, but yeah, it's obviously Frankenstein is the thing that comes up when you think of this movie or its comparisons. And yeah, what if Frankenstein's monster was a woman
Bride of Frankenstein,
who was hot and who also was a feminist? And there you go. That's what you get in this movie. But it's an interesting premise. It's about she's growing up, right? It's a metaphor for womankind, I guess. How they progressed in society across the centuries. And her creator is literally God. Which is just not subtle, is it? Like the guy who made it,
his name is Godwin.
It's Godwin, but of course it is. She calls him God. Yeah, and it is quite repetitive in what it's saying. So yeah, I just like it is. It's fine. The plot is fine, and that's what I'm gonna say. Despite this movie being kind of crazy at times, like I haven't mentioned that, and I've talked about what it's trying to say, the plot and the performances, but there are some pretty crazy scenes in this movie, pretty crazy things that go on, which we'll get into.
Yes. The one thing I would just say, because I might as well say it now, about it being unsubtle, something I realised just over this past few weeks when we've been watching these films, is that I'm more inclined to forgive films that aren't subtle if they're wacky and absurdist. This is something I was mostly going to bring up in with regards to American Fiction, you have to maybe you can guess the relevance of it there. But here, obviously, this movie is very absurdist. So while I definitely agree with you that the message is pretty obvious, it didn't really annoy me. I wasn't like, oh, like this film's so obvious, because it's kind of like, because it's so over the top in every other way. I guess like that's the thing. I don't like when movies are kind of like very understated and serious most of the time, but they're really obvious with their message. Whereas here, it's really wacky and over the top everywhere, so it might as well be over the top of its message.
I mean, is that over the topness just like window dressing? Is it just like
it may be, but it's still over the topness.
I guess it's more interesting than boring scenes, but it doesn't really interest me that much.
Yeah. I'm not saying like it makes the film fantastic. I'm just saying for me, it makes like being over the top of your messaging more excusable.
Okay, well, anyway, let's get into the actual movie.
So, in late Victorian London, medical student Max McCandles is recruited by the mad scientist Godwin Baxter to record the behaviour of a strange, nearly mute woman living in Godwin's house. Yeah, that's definitely how it starts off.
So the aesthetic is unique. I just want to point that out. And it talks about the production design, but yeah, I love the look of this house. The weird animals. I like that. That's what I do like the animals stitched together. Just walking around, William Dafoe's face is good as well, and Emma Stone, acting like a baby and having to basically grow up throughout the movie. It's a very unique, challenge that she has, and I think she does it quite well, and did this deserve to win this Performance Best Actress over Lily Gladstone? Who, of course, this was I was going to ask. That was the big shock last year when Emma Stone won it over the Native American actress.
Yeah,
Emma
racism
Stone,
still wins, boys.
Emma Stone dancing around like a baby. No, but to be fair, it's very good. Like, she does very well. I think, honestly, the consideration that people must have taken into account that Emma Stone was definitely the main character of this movie. Well, Lily Gladstone really wasn't.
Yeah,
she wasn't in that much, but Emma Stone, this movie wouldn't work without her doing a really good performance, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely agree. Although, at the same time, I feel like I feel like I could pretend to be a baby. You know,
okay,
I think I could.
Okay, but it's just the fact every scene she has to develop, you know.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, there is because by the end of the movie she does seem like a completely different person, and it is something that we stan.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Anyway, Godwin reveals her body is a woman who was pregnant and unalived herself. Godwin replaced her brain with that of the fetus, giving her an infant's mind, and named her Bella. Bella soon discovers masturbation and sexual pleasure. So I was about to say something else, and then you threw me with that masturbation and sexual pleasure. The first thing I wanted to say is, like, I feel like this movie could have been a really entertaining kind of wacky, absurdist horror. Because you mentioned Frankenstein, and I was thinking, like, you know, Frankenstein. I recently, for my own reasons, watched the original, like, 1930s Frankenstein, and shockingly, a horror from the 1930s was kind of boring. But I was thinking, like, obviously this idea of Frankenstein is very interesting, and you'd think, like, a really artistic person could come up with some kind of great story about Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, like, this movie, like, it, you know, obviously it's by a really artistic dude. It could be really wacky. Obviously, you can lean into the fact that the Frankenstein story is pretty wacky itself. So I was a bit disappointed that it really wasn't there was nothing about it that was really like horrific or unsettling, you know, apart from when she's stabbing that guy in the eyes.
I was thinking, is it a rip-off of Frankenstein? Or is it kind of unique, you know? I mean, Frankenstein never wanked, did he?
No, they can call him Wankenstein.
But yeah, but that's the thing. You put a... That's funny. But if you put a baby's brain in an adult's head, and you know the adult has sexual organs, they would actually probably just masturbate, because that's, you know, they don't have any control, and that's what they would do.
Yeah, I actually do agree. Like, as much as it's funny to make fun of this movie for that, it probably is accurate.
Yeah, that's why, of course, you don't have developing this until, you know, puberty, you know. So yeah, that's why the human body isn't built with, you know, those sexual desires right from the get-go. But it is sort of a born sexy yesterday trope as well.
It is. But does it subvert it?
Well, yeah, it's kind of that just deconstructed almost, you know.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Some critics critique the fact that this trope was in the movie, but I think that's the whole point of it. You know, like, this woman is, you know, naive. She doesn't really know what she's doing, but she's taken advantage of. And you're not meant to think that this behavior is good, or you're not meant to just be like, oh, okay, this is happening. No, you're meant to be critical. Like, why would Duncan Wedderburn prey on this woman who's clearly got the mind of like a 6-year-old, you know, despite having an adult body? You know, you're not meant to think, oh yeah, that's fine. No, the whole movie is kind of critiquing the fact that men are doing this. Yeah,
I think the fact that, like, she obviously changes to be way more mature by the end, like, pretty solidly demonstrates that it's supposed to be kind of overall the film criticizing trope.
Certainly. Yeah.
As weeks pass, Bella's vocabulary improves, and with Godwin's blessing, Max proposes to Bella. Bella accepts, but runs off with lawyer Duncan Wedderburn. I think it's just pronounced differently, but yeah, so that's the development.
So yeah, this is the start of the story of, you know, womankind. You know, the father marries her off, and he doesn't care if she likes the man. You know, she's also like trapped, but of course she does rebel eventually, and but yeah, like, in terms of the greater importance, you know, to society, this was their main function. And you know, they, in terms of being a child, they you had queens, of course, that existed, but you know, women were not, like, in ancient Rome. You didn't have any female senators, did you?
No, yeah, and I feel like queens kind of came along, or usually came along, like, later, obviously.
Yeah.
Because there were some places where they just never had. I don't think the Greeks ever had a woman king, prince, queen. There we go, nailed it. anyway, yeah, I agree with you. It's kind of like, I mean, the fact there's kind of the romance versus, well, you know, the kind of passionate romance versus, like, the practical thing, obviously, with Wedderburn versus the guy I've already forgotten the name of, who's probably on there right now. Max, that's it, nailed it.
Okay.
Anyway, Bella and Duncan travel to Lisbon. Once there, they have near constant intercourse, as Bella lives purely for pleasure. Yeah, this is kind of the thing you've already touched on, the fact that if you're have the mind of a child, basically, and you discover something that gives you pleasure. I mean, it's like how children would just eat ice cream until they're like physically sick.
Yeah.
If you have something that gives you pleasure, you would just have no impulse control.
Yeah, and I think maybe this is the only thing in women's lives that could give them pleasure, sex as well, like into
and ice cream.
The overall metaphor, yeah, it's like you can't really do anything, But then Bella, of course, looks up at this female singer, at one point. I think, that's maybe something they could do. They could pursue the arts, I think they were allowed to do that back in the day, yeah. So maybe that's the thing that they could escape to. But yeah, I want to talk about Mark Ruffalo as Duncan Wedderburn, by the way.
Yes,
he is so good.
He is, yes.
I love this role for him because he's not really this guy normally. But he's so funny.
Yeah, I mean, the movie, like some people have said, like the movie overall is really funny. I think I mostly just find this guy funny, and that's it.
Yes, he is. He's great. There's one point where he goes, "What the fuck are you talking about?" Like that. It's just...
Oh yeah, he's so like offended by just her, like the fact she's like he's kind of offended by her nonsense that in reality isn't really nonsense, but he perceives it to be nonsense.
Yeah, he's a great character, and yeah, the thing is though, he has a lot of quirky Yorgos Lanthimos dialogue. I know the movie wasn't written by him, but it's the dialogue we see in all of his movies, and it makes more sense because Bella is this kid who's this woman as well, so she would say things in a weird way. That makes sense. But yeah, just overall the quirky dialogue, it kind of wears on me a bit as we go on, and I just get less enjoyment out of it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I experienced a wearing personally. But yeah, the one thing I'll say about the Duncan that I really liked is just like the idea of like a guy who, because he's kind of like thinks he's like an alpha. He's like I wouldn't get too attached to me, and then he ends up catching feelings, and that's always very funny.
Yeah, he's a great character.
Yeah. So Duncan smuggles Bella onto a cruise ship where she befriends two passengers who open her mind to philosophy. Duncan attempts to stunt her growth to no avail. Yes. So, I mean, kind of like, obviously he continues to be frustrated. But yeah, now we get the continuing theme of the intellectual and cultural societal development of women represented through a singular woman.
Yes, she's learning about the world, but the man wants to keep her dumb. At one point, he throws away a book that she's reading. But the older woman gives another book to her. So there you go.
Yeah, I also like the bit where the older woman says, we have to stand still so our daughters can look back to see how far they've come.
Great. Fantastic.
Anyway, so during a stop at Alexandria, Bella sees the suffering of the poor and becomes distraught. Wishing to help them, she entrusts Duncan's winnings to members of the crew who falsely promise to give it to them. So this shows that she's very naive. I think there's no, I mean, everything about this is naive. The fact she's not aware of the suffering, and then that she thinks this is like a solution to the problem.
Yeah, the innocence of a child who has to learn about the world, and wants to change it. I think it's a common thing.
Yeah, votes for Corbyn.
Yeah, well, later she learns about politics and socialism, which the movie doesn't really go into. But yeah, again, this is her like experiencing like society. It's like, oh shit, this is what's and
there's the guy's like the cynic. Bella and Duncan make their way to Paris, penniless. Bella begins working at a brothel for money. Enraged, Duncan breaks down and Bella abandons him. So obviously you've got the kind of what's it called? The Madonna whore complex. I guess that's it.
Yeah, well, Bella, I'm not sure the Madonna whore complex applies. Honestly.
Definitely the whore something.
Yeah, okay, fine. But yeah, Bella, of course, gets a job. And it's the oldest job in the world, of course. That's the phrase. Yeah, which is she's now a prostitute. And yeah, the owner says, a woman plotting her course to freedom. And this is, of course, the metaphor. This is how, how do women become independent? Well, they have to get a job. What was the first job that they could do on the regular? I did wonder why she, the movie says she's free from the prejudice of her times. And, that's not, sorry, that is the case, of course. But she is also very literal, and she doesn't lie either. I don't know why is this? Because she has the mind of a child, but it seems like the fact that she was raised by a scientist that is more important to the fact that she's just she's just literal all the time. She has this line where she says she's finding life fascinating, and that's the thing. Kids don't really think like that, do they?
Yeah.
Kids don't look at society and think, oh, why is... Well, they do. Of course, they have questions about society, but then they adapt and then they want to fit in. She doesn't seem to want to fit in. She seems to want to look at things like, a scientist would, like her father, I guess. so that doesn't really combine with the metaphor in general, does it? The fact that she's just being like womankind. Well, not really.
Yeah, you're right. Like, essentially, I mean, I suppose obviously she's like, as things go on, she becomes more mature. So I guess like it's weird because she definitely does go from like a child to a fully grown adult relatively quickly. I think, I mean, sometimes, like, I remember when I was a kid, I did like have moments where I was like, oh, I'm having some real philosophical, like, when you're a kid and you first like think to yourself, oh man, like the world existed before I did, and it feels like the most profound thought ever. But
she is like an alien. That's the thing. She feels like an alien who's like, oh, I wonder what life is like. Let me find out. Yeah. Rather than like a kid, like, he would grow up and, have questions about the world but still adapt to society. That's what kids would normally do. So the only reason why she do this is because, her dad's a scientist. But
I'm
kids
with you,
scientists, as far as, they don't react like this. But
I suppose like, because the whole thing about the movie, I guess, is like, oh, because she's not raised in society, she's like free of patriarchal conditioning or whatever. But you feel like the movie could have been maybe a bit more cynical and a bit more honest if it pointed out that, hey, actually, like, once she's in society, she's not going to retain this. Exactly. She would be influenced.
She would be influenced. She would be affected. She would adapt because that's what everybody does. So
like, because I kind of thought like it's weird because in some sense, like when you think about this movie, like, oh, it's like you start off as a blank slate, but then you're like, well, everyone starts off as a blank slate. Like,
exactly. That's the point I'm making.
But, now terminally ill, Godwin asks Max to bring Bella to him. Max finds her after tracking down Duncan, who has been institutionalized. So this is obviously, well, not quite Duncan's conclusion, but you could say his climax, to use an appropriately sexual term.
Yeah, by the way, we didn't really talk about the sex scenes, I just realized. I mean, obviously they're wild, and Emma Stone is kind of crazy for doing that, but, she won an Oscar for it, so there you go.
The Academy was voting with one hand there.
Yeah, okay. I didn't like the way you went,
Okay.
Did you tell your wife you watched this movie? Did you tell your wife about what you were experiencing while watching this movie?
No. Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, I was like, I didn't mention any of it. You are right.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah, but it's obviously those scenes are weird and crazy at the same time, and now of course she's back in London, and I guess the metaphor here is that a man can't stand it when a woman finds her independence, or certainly Duncan can't. He views himself as, this traditional masculine figure in society, but he's like, no, I don't like you becoming free. So there you go.
Yeah, she wants to break free. Anyway, so Bella reconciles with Godwin and renews her plans to marry Max, but their wedding is interrupted by Duncan and General Alfie Blessington. Alfie declares Bella and he were married and that he has come to reclaim her. Bella leaves Max, but discovers Alfie's violent nature and realizes she killed herself to escape Alfie. Yeah, so like, I don't really, the thing with like Alfie is, if you were to say represents, you could say he represents like the kind of the violent, the way that like women have, like an aspect of like patriarchy, and like women's oppression has obviously been direct domestic violence. But again, obviously that the movie's kind of like, well, she's just like able to ignore that.
Well, Duncan Wedderburn already kind of fulfilled this role metaphor-wise. And so this isn't really necessary. I guess it's a nice ending, the fact that she was, trapped.
Yeah, so it makes it happy that she killed herself.
Well, Why did she think this way? Okay, so this is the reason. This solves that mystery, which nobody really cared about that much. But again, she also goes with this man because she wants to discover why she killed herself. Again, like an experiment. That's a big thing about her character, which is kind of independent of the metaphor. She likes experimenting. Which again, I'm not sure, women particularly do have that characteristic any more than like men, So
except in college.
Okay,
with other girls.
Wow, of course your mind would go there.
On Pornhub.
Great, but obviously her husband wants to trap her, doesn't he? Yeah.
Yes, he does, indeedy. So, Alfie accidentally shoots himself, threatening Bella, and passes out. Bella, with Max's help, transplants a goat's brain into Alfie's head. Bella, Max, and Toinette begin a new life in Godwin's house. So
she has been emancipated.
She's been goat-sepated.
She has removed the patriarchal forces that were oppressing her, and she has become self-reliant. She's a skilled individual. She is empowered, and she gets to live with her black lesbian girlfriend.
Yeah, what a girl boss moment.
Yeah, exactly. Well, again, it's not very subtle in how it ends.
Absolutely. Especially, I mean, obviously, it's a bit interesting because obviously, it's like quite a goofy ending, like this guy
Yeah.
like being turned into a goat, and I do kind of like how goofy it is, and that you're
Yeah,
like,
that's kind of
it's a
funny.
bit like dissonant because obviously the movie's like generally not exactly serious, but obviously kind of getting at some stuff, and it's just like, oh look, he's just like meh.
Yeah, no,
Funny.
I mean that's the comedic element. And yeah, this
Yeah.
movie is kind of funny. I'll conclude now on it because it's again we've talked about the metaphor. We've talked about how almost I didn't find it as funny as you perhaps, but yeah, it's a fine movie, and that means it's a 7 out of 10. It's just a 7.
Yes, so this is actually, I think my rating is going to make perfect sense because essentially there are things like about the movie. It's really artistic. It's reasonably funny. The premise is wacky enough that there's some like basic entertainment. Like, because, at the end of the day, a film can't really go too wrong if it's at least kind of original in a way of like, oh, right, I wasn't expecting that. But the thing it's missing is kind of a deeper like theme or like something like more profound that it's saying. But obviously, I don't mind the fact it was unsubtle as much as you for reasons I already said. So for me, I'm giving it a high 7. So similar rating, but yeah, unsurprisingly, just a little bit higher because I was a little less critical of it.
Let's get into our next movie, which is of course The Zone of Interest.
That's our movie of interest.
Yes, it is. It is our movie of interest indeed. So, The Zone of Interest is a 2023 historical drama film written and directed by Jonathan Glazer. It was co-produced in the UK, by the way.
Yeah, well, hold on a minute, because this was the UK's submission.
Yes, and it won, of course. Because,
Yeah.
well, it didn't win Best Picture or Best Adapted Screenplay, but it did win Best International.
Exactly, yes.
International feature film, so shout out the UK.
Yeah, so much
Yeah.
for Brexit means Brexit, eh?
Thank God for the Holocaust, so we could win this award.
Yeah.
So it was directed by Jonathan Glazer, written by Jonathan Glazer, based on The Zone of Interest by Martin Amis. It stars Christian Friedel and Sandra Hüller. Those are the two main characters. Sandra Hüller, of course, who we talked about last week.
Yes.
Yeah, she's actually a better character in this movie because she doesn't murder anyone, but she did in Anatomy of a Fall, of course.
Yes. Like, you know what? So literally, like you've already kind of touched on my nitpick. My nitpick was going to be, they really should have used this movie as evidence in the trial there.
That's kind of good. Anyway, the languages were German, Polish, and Yiddish, and but we have no budget. Who knows how much this movie cost?
Wait, so you're saying that the numbers, we just don't know if they're accurate or like,
Yeah.
don't really know what the numbers are.
Yes, exactly. But we do have the box office. So how much did this cost? Sorry, how much did this make?
6 million.
Wow.
Well, let's see. Again, I actually have no idea because, like, I was aware of this movie as like a big thing, like more so than Poor Things. But clearly, I don't know anything, so fuck it. 30 million.
52.
Okay.
52.8. So yeah. Anyway, Michael, can you tell me whether you liked The Zone of Interest?
Yes. Unambiguously, yes. I thought this movie was. I mean, obviously it had a kind of a meta thing, which, but then
what do you mean a meta thing?
like kind of the way I think it's not just about the Holocaust is something that's happening in the background for the characters, and it's simultaneously something that's kind of happening in the background for us as we're watching the film. I guess is like the basic thing about it.
Well, yeah, but of course we experience that very differently to the characters.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I feel like
unless you're just fine with the Holocaust happening,
yeah, I was just
unless
like,
you're like
cool.
them and just going about, this is.
I was really invested in like, that's some good oven design you got there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like, I mean, I think this movie is quite profound in the way it tackles this issue, and yeah, I loved it. It's do you want me to give away it's my favorite movie that we were speaking about?
Okay, including the ones we did last week.
Including the ones we did last week,
Okay.
including Maestro.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yes. Another Jewish person in that movie.
Yeah, so yeah, this movie could have used
Bernstein.
more fake giant noses, just because I was a bit confused about who was Jewish.
Yes. So The Zone of Interest is a movie which is very good. I'm not sure, did I like it? It's honestly, it's weird. I was going to say this. It's weird to say, oh yeah, I loved it, because obviously you really shouldn't love this movie because it's kind of very hard to watch at times because of what's happening. Of course, I think everybody's aware of what went on at Auschwitz. I'd find it incredible if someone watched this movie and was like, what's that train doing? Where's it going? Why are there so many gunshots?
That would be if you showed the women from Poor Things this.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. So yeah, it's therefore, because you know what's happening in the background, you can appreciate how good it is, and it is a great movie. It is a great work of art, and we'll go into it as much as we can. And yeah,
Yeah.
Jonathan Glazer did something really tremendous here. The amount of effort he put in to make this movie and to make it as good as it was is fantastic. But yeah, obviously it's weird to say this movie is fantastic. I loved it. Well, you can't really love it if you truly appreciate how good it is. Honestly, that's my opinion on it.
That's a very powerful way of saying it, Luke.
Thank you.
I have to say that I agree.
So let's get into the plot then.
Yes. So the film focuses on the
I
life
assume you don't have any nitpicks.
No, I
Oh,
don't.
you already said you didn't.
The one I said, yeah.
Yeah.
So the film focuses on the life of German Auschwitz commandant Rudolf Hoss, I believe it's pronounced Hoss, and his wife Hedwig, who live with their family in a home in the zone of interest next to the German delousing camp. Oh yeah, I forgot that's what they had to make sure there was there's so many of them. They have typhus, and we got to make sure that we solve this typhus. And clearly, it's the lice that are the problem. So we just got to spray them with this gas, and it will get rid of all the lice. But unfortunately, the Allies keep bombing the train tracks, and we're not getting enough supplies in.
Yeah,
so some of them are accidentally dying.
That scene was really weird when when the characters just said that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a day in the life of these people who are trying to make their life work. Trying to have a normal family life, be happy, all of that, and with the genocide next door. Like, how you got the annoying neighbours next door.
Yes, neighbours from hell.
Yeah, well, and then you have actual hell.
Yes.
So yeah, but of course, yeah, obviously, these people. Well, the film asks the question: how can these people live like this? Because of course, Rudolf Hoss and his wife Hedwig did actually live like this. This is accurate. They literally lived right next to Auschwitz.
Yeah.
And it's not even like talking about how could they have carried this out. How could they live so close to Auschwitz? It's incredible. Not just the fact that they did it. How could they be in proximity to it? And of course, the mother has to leave because she can't cope with it. And there's just the horrors are just over the wall. And the film, I think, basically sets that up, and it shocks you at first about what is happening, how close these characters are, and then it kind of explains why and how this family can live right next door to Auschwitz. And it's for two reasons really, which is again,
love the game.
That's one of them. Basically, they love what they're doing because they are benefiting from it. They have a nice house, even if it is where it is, and also at the same time, they've just kind of lost their humanity. Yes, that's how they can do it. And again, the movie has a lot of, I guess, neutral shots, like documentary style shots, like almost like Paranormal Activity, So yeah, it's just that enhances it's just the day in the life of these Nazis,
Yes.
But yeah, anything to say?
No, yeah. I mean, I think we'll probably get into it enough as we go on, but I would absolutely agree. Like that's the focus of the movie, and I think you said it sufficiently. So, the film focuses on the life of So, Glazer sought to make a film that demystifies the perpetrators of the Holocaust as mythologically evil. He wanted to tell the story of the Holocaust not as something safely in the past, but a story of the here and now. He visited. He visited Auschwitz and was affected by the Hoss residents being separated from the camp by a mere garden wall. He sought to show how we're emotionally and politically closer to the perpetrator culture than we'd like to think. So that's what they call in the business a good quote, and I think that really does summarize just how fantastic the film is.
Yeah, well, because there is there's a literal thing about how could these Nazis live so close to Auschwitz, or how could this family specifically live so close to Auschwitz? How could they do that? Again, the movie explains that, but also like what does this say about the here and now? Because it's not just something in the past, which is it's so good he said that. Because
if only he'd spoken up at the Oscars.
Yes, we'll get to that, but yeah, basically anyone can be this evil. Like this is a normal family, just doing a horrific thing, and it's so easy, I think, as audience members in the West to look at this family and be like, well, they're not so different to us, and how they act. Of course, they have servants and everything, but then obviously they're benefiting, and the father specifically is responsible for this genocide that's going on just next door. So yeah, how different are we to the Nazis? And of course, that is the point, that these, again, when he says, the Holocaust isn't mythologically evil, it's still evil, of course, but it's not mythologically, like, it's not something that just can't happen, No, it did happen. It happened to these people who are, you look at it's just a normal nuclear family, it's kind of similar to, the people watching the movie, and yeah, it just does make you think, which we'll get into more about the real world, well, the present day, I guess, similarities to what happened, what was happening in this movie, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the quote itself said it really well. And I mean, I guess I'm happy to kind of unpack how it does that as we progress through the script, because I am thinking about like specific moments where you can see that. But
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I guess let's just jump into the script. So Rudolf Hoss, head of the Auschwitz concentration camp, lives with his wife Hedwig and their 5 children in an idyllic home next to the camp. Hoss takes the children out to swim and fish, and Hedwig spends time tending the garden. So yeah, this is like pretty obvious. Like they've created this beautiful world for themselves, and they're just completely able to ignore what's happening in the background.
Yeah, it's kind of a, I don't know, anthropological, look at this, like it's like studying how this could happen. And yeah, again, the camera never gets close to them at all. Like I said, these neutral shots, and yeah, and just again, at the start of the movie, it's just inherently shocking to see them this close. And then, of course, we haven't mentioned it yet, but we will next. It's not just the fact that they live so close; it's what we hear and see in the background.
Yes. I mean, I guess since you said it, we'll move on. So murdered Jews' belongings are given to the family. Beyond the garden wall, gunshot screaming and the sounds of trains and furnaces are often audible. So I guess, have you heard about the fact that this movie was like constructed as basically 2 movies?
Yes.
Yeah, which so basically what happened is they were like, we'll film the movie of just like this family, and then they were like, oh, also a completely separate like sound design crew make the soundtrack, or like the kind of diegetic sound that would go along with a movie about the Holocaust. And because the 2 things are like spliced on top of each other, but the actors didn't know about it, they're not even reacting to any of the sounds. So yeah, it really does a good job at portraying that kind of detachment.
Yeah. It's sometimes, of course, the actors are reacting to the sounds. Sometimes, but most of the time they're not. And yeah, again, the sound design is incredible. Like, it's a great idea. Of course, what you explained, and how it's executed is great as well. And yeah, again, there's this idea of, particularly in horror, like it's scary what you can't see, and the slow moving train. When you have this family or this party, this family enjoying themselves, and the slow moving train in the background. It's like, oh, that's such a great like horror shot, and therefore, and I think that I guess applies to this movie. So yeah, it's a great idea, man, and it just again creates that horror. And Jonathan Glazer, I think, when he came up with this, he knew how to.
He fist pumped.
I don't think he did that. When Hoss is smoking outside and you see the smoke from the chimney in the background, I think that was like probably the worst shot in terms of, I don't mean worst as in it was badly done.
Yeah, it's like he's smoking them.
Yeah,
it establishes the connection.
Exactly. Yes. It's the most horrific. He's just doing something casually as smoking in his back garden. But at the same time, he's literally smoking. Or the Jewish bodies, of course, which have been killed, are smoking in the background. So yeah, it's and I think again, if we want to get into, the fact that it could be a metaphor for today, I mean, we have to mention a word we haven't mentioned yet, Gaza.
Yes.
And maybe the West is kind of similar to that's the thing. It's so literal. Like they're living right next to Auschwitz and having a normal, happy family life. It's so fucking literal, but it's realistic. So it's not like this literally fucking happened. But again, applying it to nowadays, again, nothing is so literal as what happened here. But again, what happened in Gaza? I mean, how close are major cities in Israel to which of course they enjoy a high quality of life? How close are they to what's happening in Gaza? And how are we in the West? How we live relatively good lives, and we see we know what's happening in Gaza, but nothing happens, does it? Apart from recently, when apparently there might be a ceasefire, so that's good.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's great because obviously, like, people like the whole October 7th thing, whatever you want to say about it. It was literally like it's kind of crazy that they targeted a music festival. Like that's the thing. It was literally like, and I know like someone said like there was a tweet that was like my son was kidnapped after he attended a rave outside Auschwitz, and I feel like a real victim. Yeah,
well, yeah. The thing is, what made it crazy for me, what happened on October the 7th, it wasn't just like a music festival. It was like a music festival for peace or something. That's what it was described as. The closest thing today, certainly in the West, is what is happening in Gaza. And watching this movie, this is a literal, case of, a genocide happening next door. You can't ignore it, Well, the family tries to ignore it, but, eventually you're not going to be able to, if you have any humanity. And the West is kind of like like how close are we to the Hosses in that regard?
Absolutely. Anyway, so Hoss sends a message to SS personnel chastising them for picking lilacs, causing the plants to bleed, Hedwig's mother visits and is impressed by the status her daughter has achieved. So I guess the significance of the whole thing. I mean, like my thoughts there is just that it's like a pretty like it's not like it's a very small thing compared to the fact that he's murdering a massive population of people.
Yeah. Well, again, that's the point as well. But again, also, it's not just the banality of evil, which is a phrase I did mention before, and was like, we'll come back to it. But I don't think it is the banality of evil, even though Spielberg says it's like that. But I think he's wrong, honestly.
Stupid.
Yeah. What does he know about Holocaust movies? But
I was gonna say,
yeah. These people are happy with their lives. Like, this is like, suburbia, of course. It's a normal nuclear family, and yeah, the Nazi project, the genocide, is something they're invested in. It's something that they are happy is going on because her mum talks about cleaning for a Jewish woman who may be in the camp.
Yes.
They have been uplifted in the society. They are, socially mobile. They have benefited from this Nazi project. And therefore, when when fucking Hoss, whatever his name is, talks about, or first name, when he talks about the lilacs and, doesn't want the plants to bleed, he's like, no, I want this to be like a normal, suburban house, I want this to be like, like this is a kind of thing that some fucking guy in, modern suburbia in America or even the UK would, complain about, like, and so I think that's the point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Anyway, so Hoss receives word that he is being promoted and must move to Oranienburg, near Berlin. Hedwig is dismayed at the news and asks him to convince his superiors to let her and the children remain in their home. The request is approved. Yeah, so what I love about this is, like, obviously, it would be much simpler if the movie was just, it shows how happy they are. Look, these people, they're happy with the Holocaust going on. But it's not just that. It's the fact that they're, like, actively complaining about the situation, in like with these really stupid grievances, like, oh man, and like there's a bit where he's like saying how stressed out he is about work, and it's just like crazy that for him, like, the stress that you would have if you've got to send off like a spreadsheet for a business meeting or something is what he's feeling about how to dispose of loads of Jewish bodies.
No, I mean, it's it is like that, and that is kind of like more the banality of evil, like, he's just treating this genocide like a day job. But also, why do they want to stay here? Because again, they talk about how that Hedwig is like, we dreamed of this when we were 17. They are upwardly mobile. Their lives have improved. Like, she calls herself the Queen of Auschwitz and like brags about it. And it's like, how can they live next to Auschwitz? Because they've benefited so much from this situation, and therefore they are absolutely fine with what's happening next door because, like, they have servants. They have a nice garden. And they talk again about Lebensraum. Living space, which was a key tenet of this Nazi ideology. Like, there is living space that we will take and give to the German population, and they can become, farmers or whatever. And we take it from these countries, and of course the Jews as well in these countries. And it's like this popular kind of imperialism, or and this is why the Nazis could do what they did, because it's like people benefited from it. The population did, in this regard, and this is important to point out because the Nazis didn't just come in and just do all this shit, and the German population was none the wiser. It's like that there are a sizable chunk of people who will benefit from fascism, like these people did. They benefit so much that they're fine with the sacrifice, I guess, of what's happening next door. They're fine with that. They're okay with that. They give that the thumbs up, and they don't want to leave.
I watched a good like video recently about how like the petty bourgeois were like massive, like they were the biggest fans of the Nazis, and obviously like that kind of, it's like the aspirational, like people use the term aspirational working class, but I feel like I mean, obviously all power to them if they can do it in a non-evil way, but I feel like maybe there's a way in which like those people are most likely to be like, okay, cool.
Well, exactly, people vote because they want to improve their lives, and it's, again, this is what Glazer was saying, how close are we to this family? How far would you go if it meant you went from living in a shitty situation to owning a nice house and having servants? Would you accept a genocide next door? Well, these guys did, so maybe other people would as well.
Yes. Anyways, Hedwig's mother departs unannounced after seeing and smelling the burning crematorium at night. She leaves a note that upsets Hedwig, causing her to lash out and threaten her servants. Yeah, this is like an interesting thing because obviously with the mom, there's kind of the aspect of like the judgment of like the fact that they can live like that, whereas obviously she can't. But then obviously there's the fact that she's still fine with it going on.
Yeah,
she just doesn't want to be directly confronted with it.
Yeah, and this is I think an important aspect, because you could say, well, these people, most people would not put up with this. Most people, would not accept this Lebensraum if it meant, Auschwitz was next door. But there is another group of people who are fine with it happening, but they just don't want to see it. And I think, talking about the United States and illegal immigration for one second, There's just been some, polling that has been happening in the last few months, which show that Americans very much want, ICE deporting a lot of these illegal immigrants, but they don't actually want to see it happening. They would prefer if it just happens in the background. Like, they want mass deportations of these illegal immigrants, but if it was happening on their streets, they would be, oh, I don't want to see that, no. And I think this is a very large percentage of the population, who Hedwig's mother represents.
Yeah, it is like crazy, and obviously there's loads of examples where you just think like the disconnect between like people supporting policies that they would actually hate to see the consequences of, which is like, it is wild that there's
yeah, they just don't want to see it. It can happen in the background, but I just don't want to be there.
Yes. Anyway, so in Berlin, Hoss is tasked with heading an operation named after him that will transport 700,000 Hungarian Jews to either work at the camps, be killed, or deloused. He can now move back to Auschwitz and reunite with his family. He vacantly attends a party and tells Hedwig that he spent his time at the party thinking about the most efficient way to gas the attendees. This is like an interesting moment because it's kind of like, on some level, this is the closest the character gets to admitting that they're evil, or like that they're not normal, because obviously, like, well, that's not a normal thing to think about, but obviously it does get to the fact that, like, it has just become a job, like a problem to be solved, and obviously if you think about it that way, you can really dehumanize people.
It's a weird thing that he does, think about gassing the attendees, but again, like, he's just so far gone that this is what he can think about. Like, it's like he is diseased, I guess. You spend long enough like this, well, this is kind of the mentality you'll pick up, Again, he's just sick. I guess that would be the best way to phrase it,
Speaking of sick, as Hoss leaves his office and descends a stairway, he retches repeatedly and stares into the darkness of the corridors. In the present day, a group of janitors clean the Auschwitz-Birkenau Museum. Back in 1944, Hoss continues downstairs, descending into darkness. Now, endings. People like to have interpretations of them. I think what the museum thing is communicating is like, I'm comfortable with that. Do you have any interpretation of like the significance of him? Rather, so like I'm pretty sure that I've got the right interpretation, and it's an interpretation I've seen other people have.
Then.
So my interpretation is it's kind of like saying how you can't. I'm not sure I'm going to word it perfectly. You really can't reflect properly on evil like this because even the museum, which is obviously supposed to be remembering this great evil, you still have these people like going about kind of cleaning it, like just doing busybody day work in a kind of dispassionate way. Because ultimately, when this evil happens, there's no appropriate response, or there's no way you can fully kind of absorb the gravity of what's happening. And I think that's like the point, that even the Holocaust Museum has kind of been subsumed into the day-to-day minutiae of life. And obviously it's not equivalent to the people who are actually running it and letting that happen, but I think that's kind of the parallel that's drawing. And it kind of functions as almost like a critique, because I was thinking about, while I was watching this movie, I'll admit, I paused because I got a message on Skype and I responded to that message, and it was a message about something relatively unimportant, and I went back to the movie. I was like, even as I'm watching this movie about this evil thing, I'm like stopping it and just like participating in the minutiae of life. So like that's kind of what I think it's kind of getting at.
Yeah, maybe that's the interpretation. Yeah, no, that's good. I mean,
but do you sorry, I was just going to say, just say what you're going to say, but also, do you have like a thing about like why he retches specifically? Because that's something that I'm not.
Well, yeah, I kind of said it before, honestly. I didn't mean to, but yeah, like
that he's sick.
He's sick, and no human being should act like he acts. That's why he throws up. Because like he's descending into the darkness. That's literally what it says on Wikipedia, and that's what he does. Yes. Like if you keep going, you've become something that you really shouldn't, like, you are sick, literally.
So that's the movie, but onto, of course, I mean, we're talking about the Oscars, onto that. The film's release coincided with the ongoing genocide by Israel and Gaza. In his acceptance speech at the 96th Academy Awards, Glazer said, "The Zone of Interest shows where dehumanization leads at its worst, saying, right now we stand here as men who refute their Jewishness and the Holocaust being hijacked by an occupation which has led to conflict for so many innocent people." Based. More like baster.
Yeah, I was so glad he said that, because obviously I was watching at the time, and the Zone of Interest won, and the fucking genocide's still going on, but it was more in people's minds, I guess, a year ago. But now, thankfully, because of the ceasefire, maybe it's going to stop. But and I was thinking when he got up to do his speech, is he going to mention Gaza? Well, is he going to mention? Is he going to refer to it? Because obviously that's the big elephant in the room. This is an anti-genocide movie. How could these people go about their normal lives while this horrific genocide is happening inside this walled area? Well, how could they? Well, maybe maybe there's a comparison there, and
Yeah.
he could be an enthused Zionist. That there was a
Yes.
chance that could be the case, because again, somehow these people have just this massive fucking blind spot, which is incredible to me. But there you go.
Yeah.
It's just, again, they're not mad that the Holocaust happened. They're mad it happened to them, rather than just in general that you shouldn't commit genocides. But he did not have that opinion, which we should not take that for granted, and
Yeah.
we shouldn't take that for granted either, that he was brave enough to say that, because that was a big thing that he did. And again, there are not a lot of there's not that much sympathy for the Palestinians in Hollywood compared to like Ukraine, for instance. It wasn't just an easy thing to say. So yeah, that is we have to give credit to him for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I was going to say, like, I don't want to take shots, but it's kind of shocking to me. Like, I mean, obviously we already, we mentioned YMS, your favorite person in the world, and he didn't do this, but it's crazy to me how many people just didn't mention Gaza. Like, they talk about this movie, and like me personally, like, I couldn't watch this movie and talk about it in any context without being like, oh, and also, since this movie is literally about people ignoring a genocide and going about their life, free Palestine, end the occupation, all that.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's the comparison is just so stark. You just can't ignore it. Like, I don't know how some.
But exactly. Some people have managed to, which is crazy.
Yeah. Some people have managed, and some people are even offended that you would bring it up. Which again, it's just how fucking crazy the whole situation is. But anyway, let's conclude. I'll go first and say, I think it's obviously a very well made movie. You can't really love it because of what happens, but yeah, it's Jonathan Glazer knocks it out of the park, what he did, and also the fact that he acknowledged what's happening in Gaza and compared it to what happened here. Yeah, I mean, obviously he with him saying, "Oh, how close are we to what happened back in the day?" Yeah, there's that matters, and that knocks it up. So I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Really, really great movie, really great idea.
Yeah. So yeah, we're basically on the same level. I gave it a low 9, which is functionally a 9. And yeah, I just want to say, like, the one thing that kind of holds us back is, like, I almost feel like, and I'm not going to get into this because obviously I don't have time, but like when I was watching, I was like, I feel like in a way you could almost go hard with this concept. I'm not going to elaborate on that, but like I feel like there is actually a potential version of the movie which would be a 10. And yeah, it's not worth me getting into.
Okay.
But yeah, just for the record.
All right, thanks for that. Anyway, shall we move on to American fiction?
Yeah,
now?
we should. Would you like to tell us a thing, or perhaps even 2 things, if there's time, about American fiction?
Yeah, so we saved this for last, even though, of course, it won Best Adapted Screenplay at the Oscars.
Yeah, take that, Academy.
Yeah, God, because this is so... All right. So American Fiction is
You haven't asked me what I think about it yet, Luke.
It's a 2023 American comedy drama film written and directed by Cord Jefferson in his featured directorial debut. Wow. Imagine winning an Oscar
Right
in your
gate.
directorial debut. Fucking hell.
It's almost like they control Hollywood.
Jeffrey Wright stars, as well as Tracy Ellis Ross, John Ortiz. It's based on Erasure, by the way, by Percival Everett. That's what it's adapted from. The screenplay is also by Cord Jefferson. And as I was saying, it stars John Ortiz, Erica Alexander, Leslie Uggams, Adam Brody, Issa Rae, Sterling K. Brown. The movie had a budget of... firstly, it was released in December 15th, 2023. What was the budget?
15 million.
It was 10.
Okay.
What about the box office?
40 million.
23.
Okay.
So yeah, didn't have that much appeal. Again, these black movies just...
Yeah. Well, maybe if it's about gangsters.
Yeah, it would have worked. Yeah. Anyway, Michael, can you tell me whether you liked American Fiction?
No. This movie, it's very it's very on the nose, and I already set myself up here where I said, like, I don't mind movies that are on the nose if they're kind of really absurdist and wacky. This movie, there is like some like meta stuff, and like it obviously has a theme, and there are moments where it's handled better than other moments. But overall, there are like way too many moments in this movie which I had to describe as groaners, like moments where it's just like it's so obvious, like, oh, okay, yeah. And obviously the movie, I think it takes itself quite seriously in contrast to Barbie or in contrast to Poor Things, where they do have a pretty clear, obvious thematic message, but at least, like I said, for me the wackiness takes away from that. What do you think?
I mean, I don't think this is a good movie. I think, again, it's so on the nose and so like it's like I talked about Poor Things being on the nose or not subtle. This is just so unsubtle, man. This is just crazy. I mean, like, I don't know how Cord Jefferson wrote this. I didn't think, maybe I should tone it down a bit. So yeah, and again, the plot isn't that interesting either. It's got some good performances. Jeffrey Wright is very good, but yeah, this is just meh, man. It's just I don't know how this won Best Original Screenplay. Well, I do, of course.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, yeah, because obviously
Adapted, sorry. Yeah.
yeah, this movie, like, there is like the massive irony, and I think like maybe at the end we'll have to talk about like whether it's meta, because like there's a whole thing going on there. But I guess we'll just jump in. So the movie follows a frustrated African-American novelist who writes an outlandish satire of stereotypical black books, only for it to be mistaken for serious literature and published to high sales and critical praise. I have one thing to say. It's probably not the most important thing I could say, but I personally am not even aware of any like books about being like an African or like a black gangster. Like, I was thinking to myself, like, it's kind of funny because the premise of the movie is like, oh, people only like black like literature and whatever if it's about, you know, growing up on the streets and killing a homeboy and blah blah blah.
Well,
I
yeah.
actually didn't know about that.
Well, so that's the thing. So nobody reads books anymore, which was pointed out in the movie. The original book that this is adapted from came out in 2001. Maybe that was the case back then, and certainly this does feel, in some aspects, like it is from a different era, but some aspects it doesn't, because there's a lot of talk about, you know, Black Lives Matter and, you know, white liberals, you know, being insufferable, which we'll get to. But yeah, I mean, yeah, again, the black experience is confined to easily consumable slop for white liberals, and I think that's the message that is repeated over and over and over again. And yeah, it has these Get Out similarities, of course, with who it's targeting. Again, you know, the publisher, the woman, you know, did you see what poster she has in the background?
Oh God,
no, you didn't. She has an RBG poster.
Okay, that's
in the background of her office. Yeah, which again, it's funny, but it's so fucking literal. Like, you don't need to. Like, if the character wasn't so absurd, that would be fine. You know, oh look, it's an RBG poster, but you've already made the point because it's so fucking on the nose.
Yeah,
and you're sticking up like, well done. Give yourself a round of applause, Kojak. That was really smart. Jesus Christ. Yeah, and yeah, the overall point as well. You know, Americans, even liberals, you know, often liberals avoid these harsh realities, and they like comforting narratives and superficial engagement with, you know, with the truth, essentially, you know, rather than actually delving deep into the issues and, you know, and everything like that. But again, it's just so obvious what the point the movie is trying to make. But yeah, I do have a couple of nitpicks, by the way.
Oh, lovely.
So Sterling K. Brown looks nothing like Jeffrey Wright. There's no way they're brothers. That's crazy.
Yeah, sorry, well, a good job for not thinking they all look alike.
Exactly. I paid more attention to that than this fucking movie in terms of, you know, black diversity. Oh yeah, it's two black people. They can be brothers. That's fine, even though they don't look anything alike. And yeah, there's a lot of product placement in this movie. Johnny Walker gets a nice shout out.
Yeah,
and also there's this Dunkin' Donuts.
Because he's in Boston.
Yeah, because he's in Boston, so of course Dunkin' Donuts gets a shout out. But yeah, let's go into the script now.
Yeah, so Monk's University places him on temporary leave due to him being too brash and uppity with students over racial issues. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, so this movie, right away, it'll let you know what you're in for, because this white woman is like, I don't like that you put the N-word on the screen. Like, that's offensive, with like no regard for the fact she's talking to a black guy who obviously, like, you know, not to say black people are allowed to be completely in charge of that necessarily, but pretty obviously, if he's okay with it, you're being pretty ridiculous if you complain. Very obviously like a stereotype of like a white liberal with no subtlety.
And the young generation of white liberals, you know, especially who get offended over everything, and would get offended over this, even though again, it just starts off right off the bat, like, oh, we're going to parody this social demographic,
and like literally, he's like, well, I got over it, so you should too. And it's kind of like, it's one of those things where already that's kind of like, okay, we already get the point. He didn't really need to explicitly spell it out like that.
But this movie loves to spell it out.
Yeah, that's what it's about, writing novels. So while Monk's novels receive academic praise, they sell poorly, and publishers reject his latest effort for not being black enough. And he like goes to that bookstore, and it's like all of his books are under the African American study section. It's like, I don't think that in reality, just because a book's written by a black person, they put it in the African American study section.
I mean, again, like, it's kind of meant to be
it's meant to be an exaggeration.
Yeah, there's meant to be an exaggeration, and, you know, that's fine. But yeah, again, it's just he's boxed in by these liberals who think they're helping, but they're not. Yeah, it's just, we're going to say that a lot. So that's another example of it. Yeah.
So, at a book festival in Boston, Monk sees an interview of Sinatra Golden, whose best-selling novel, Weez Lives in the Ghetto, sorry, I got it wrong, Weez Lives in Da Ghetto, panders to black stereotypes. Yeah, that's, the scene of her reading that's actually, like, maybe the, like, funniest moment where I felt like I was laughing with the movie, where she's like, Sharonda, you is at this place, or whatever she's, like, saying. And it's, like, how funny, like, exaggerated it is. Like, I did find that entertaining. So it
is just very unsubtle.
Yes.
At the same time, but again, it is ludicrous, which is good. It's good that it's ludicrous because it is quite a funny scene. But there is a problem with this because when you're doing a movie like this, you have to have you have to be careful to not exaggerate things too much and make things too ludicrous if the rest of your movie is kind of based in reality.
Yes.
And this world kind of exists in reality. Like, it's a comedy, but, characters oftentimes aren't ridiculous. It's like a normal world that these guys live in, not like a comedic world. But this book it just goes too far because it's just so, again, ridiculous. Like, there's no way someone would actually write this and people would think it's great. That would not happen. So you need to tone that down, but again, then it's not as funny. But then you need to make the rest of your movie a bit more ludicrous. So you got the balance wrong. The tone is off, and that again is a problem. Also, maybe this was the case back in 2001, but I feel like honestly there have been a lot of like black stories since then, and there is a good article written by Jason England that talks about this. About how there's actually quite a lot of black media nowadays, and that black people aren't as confined as they once were back in 2001. And you can say, things need to get better, but the whole thing about ghetto and gangsters and shit, I feel like that is very like 90s and 2000s.
Yeah,
like you don't really see that much in terms of TV, and that's a good thing, obviously. But the point is, I do think things have progressed. I do think things are a lot better than they were 25 years ago. And yeah, in this article, Jason England also accuses the adaptation of like dumbing down the actual novel that it's based on as well.
Oh, I could see that.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so speaking of like the whole serious thing, by the way, Monk's sister Lisa, who is a black physician, suffers a fatal heart attack. Their brother Cliff, a black plastic surgeon, attends Lisa's funeral. Monk starts dating Coraline, a black lawyer living across the street from his black mother's beach house. So yeah, the thing.
Sorry, I put black in front of everything there.
I thought that would be funny. Yeah.
The movie is hammering the point home, as it always fucking does. Look, you have a plastic surgeon who's black, a lawyer who's black, a physician who's black, and their black mother has a beach house.
Yeah. Oh god, yeah. So two things. One, all that stuff about like them being, well, actually I've touched on the black thing. Like one of the things I noted down is that like obviously this is one of the other. See, I want to use the word meta, but I really don't know. And maybe I just need to get this out of the way now. Do you think this movie is like self-aware about like the fact that it's kind okay, so I'll say this right now. So one of the things it's like talking about is like, they want media to be really black, like super black, but everyone in this movie is constantly obsessed with the fact they're black. Like the first thing they say when they meet like his girlfriend is, "I'm glad you're not white." Like that's the first thing two independent people say. Like these people are just obsessed with the fact they're black. And like is that meta? Is that like on purpose that this is a piece of media that's criticizing other media for having to be about characters being black, but every single character in this movie is obsessed with being black?
No, I just think that's for comedy, honestly. I just think they say that for comedic purposes.
Okay, fine.
Because yeah, this guy doesn't really feel that black, because he isn't. So it's like, oh, you've got another white girlfriend. What is it? I think that's the case, but yeah.
The other thing I was going to say is like obviously all of that stuff you just mentioned was like really kind of serious stuff, like melodrama, which again like gets to the point you were saying of this movie, like it needs to pick a tone.
Yes, the tone is off in some instances, and but yeah, the point of look, you've got all these black people who have well-paying jobs and good professions. Yeah, they're not just drug dealers, are they? They're not a monolith, as in the Key and Peele sketch.
Oh yeah, like, we ain't a monolith.
We ain't a monolith, but they're literally not a monolith. They're all different. No, all black people are very well educated and have a lot of disposable income. Apparently, that's what I think of black people for this movie. But yeah, no, there's this ad as well, which again, it's so fucking unsubtle. Like, there's this ad on the TV.
I know which one you're talking about.
It's Black Stories Month on this TV channel. And it says it's celebrating the diversity of the African American experience, and then someone just gets shot.
Yes.
So it's not actually that diverse, is it? The African American experience, well, at least it's not on TV. That's what it's the media doesn't portray it that way.
It's so clever.
Yeah, that's very clever. Yeah, as you said, yes. And later in the movie, I think Monk's agent says to him, "I see what you're doing," and Monk replies, "Good, because it's not subtle." And I'm like, yeah,
is it meta? Is this movie just genius?
Like, yeah, you're making things so unsubtle that you maybe have to question, wait, is this movie because it's so on the nose, and therefore it can't be. It can't be that stupid. It can't be that bad. So it has to be genius. But I don't know.
I know. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, anyway, let's continue.
Frustrated by Sintaro's success and the cost of care for his mum, Monk writes My Pathology, See, because I have a very strong southeastern English accent, you can't even tell that I should be pronouncing that with TH. A satirical novel mocking the literary stereotypes expected from black writers. I will say, I liked the scene where like he's writing the novel and the characters in the novel are interacting, and I was thinking like, I wish that would have happened more in this movie. Like if it was about him, a bit like the movie. Oh God, no, I'm just writing. YMS literally mentioned this in his review of it, but the movie adaptation by Charlie Kaufman, which is like a movie about Charlie Kaufman writing a movie.
Okay, yeah. Well, again, I think that is a good idea. I like the idea of black characters in Monk's room talking to him. You know, that's a good choice. I like that.
After submitting the novel to publishers out of contempt, Monk is shocked to be offered a $750,000 advance, and his agent convinces him of adopting the persona of convict on the run, Stag R. Lee. Yeah. I will say, at first I assumed like he was writing a novel because he was expecting it to be a success so that he could pay for his mum's thingies, but I guess he just decided to write an entire novel out of spite.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite weird because he decides to write it because of, this, his mum's treatment is going to cost a lot. Okay.
Yeah.
But then he doesn't want to submit it. No, he does want to submit it, but he doesn't think it'll be a success. So
yeah.
Did you just write it out of frustration then? That's a weird thing to do, but okay. But yeah, it is, again, quite predictable what happens. But, the woman talking to him, is just confused about, wait, this guy is the convict? And until he swears, Oh,
he's like, oh, fuck yeah, I'm the convict. And she's like, oh, I was confused. It's so obvious, yeah.
God, it's just so fucking bad, man. It's, again, you don't exist in this world where things are crazy, so you can't have this just crazy deluded character. Again, nobody would be like, oh God, it's too ridiculous for this movie. And again, it's too on the nose, but let's continue. Right,
so as Stag, Monk is offered a movie deal. In response to comments by publishing executives, Monk tries to sabotage the deal, changing the title to Fuck. The executives reluctantly agree. Yeah, so he wants his mum to die in a poorhouse because he's so pompous. Yeah, I mean, whatever.
Just more of the same, more mocking liberals, how they'll just go along with it because it's raw, Of course he's swearing. Yeah, it's just okay. We get it, man. Right, let's move on.
So, Monk is asked to judge a literary award, but his publisher submits Fuck, forcing him to judge his own novel. The panel's white judges rave over Fuck. See, this is one of those moments where I'm like, again, I have a sense that maybe on some level there is something meta going on because he's like literally judging his own book.
But this. I thought you were going to say that the fact that the Oscars gave him Claude Jefferson an Academy Award, just like
that's also something else.
Just like these people, these white judges are raving over Fuck, but the meta aspect doesn't really work because this movie isn't about fucking gangsters in the ghetto or the hood.
Yeah, so, that's a good point. Yeah,
I don't see the meta element there, but yeah, again, like this is one of the instances where maybe this movie was made because it's like, oh, we can mock white liberals because of Black Lives Matter and because the police needs to be defunded, etc. Which is stuff they were saying after 2020.
Sintara calls Fuck pandering. Monk agrees, but argues that Sintara's book is trauma porn and inauthentic. Sintara says she researched her book by interviewing voiceless people, and that it is not her fault if white readers form stereotypes from her book. This is the only moment in the film which I noted down as interesting. In fact, the specific words I wrote were. Is it bad to show a common experience for black people because that's I don't know why I read it out word for word because it wasn't that interesting way of writing it, but yeah, like that's like an interesting idea. Is it offensive to show a common experience that a lot of people actually go through just because of like the optics of it? Or is that like an important thing to do?
No, I get her argument, because she's just, as she said, she's just catering to the market. But yeah, like it's not her fault if white readers judge her book, and I guess the difference would be compared to what Stag R. Lee is doing, or Monk, is that she researched her book, like she actually cares about it, so that makes a difference. I'm not sure I honestly really agree with that, because like how it comes out matters. But yeah, I guess the movie saying there is a place for books like this, and it's the most interesting moment of the movie because it's actually having a conversation about these issues without just being glib or on the nose about it or just mocking liberals. But yeah.
And then the white people show up. Yes. So, Fuck is chosen as the winner by the literary award judges. The only thing I have to say here, I mentioned I was a groaner. This was the worst moment.
Oh yes.
Like when, obviously they ignore the black people who are saying they don't like the book, and they pick the book, and then they say, I think it's just important to elevate black voices.
Yes.
And it's like I genuinely. I actually groaned. Like I'm not using the phrase groaner metaphorically.
You don't think this movie could get any more on the nose, and this is why I think this movie is actually really bad. Well, it's not. It's quite bad, and it's not like doing a meta thing because it's just really badly done. Like how can you direct that and think that's good? No, I'm sorry. There's that. No, it's awful. I will say, by the way, on the Santara thing, something I forgot to mention is, I don't know why she makes a good point about, oh yeah, my book is researched and there's a market for this, but why doesn't she fucking call it pandering? And I didn't really get that. Like, why to her it's fuck pandering, but her book isn't? How? Because she doesn't know.
Yeah, she doesn't know whether or not they researched it.
Yeah, she doesn't know whether the Stag Alley guy didn't research it and this is his actual life, and yeah. So I didn't really get that. It wasn't explained. But anyway, let's move on.
So, Monk goes on stage at the awards ceremony and says he has a confession to make. The film cuts to black, and the events shown are revealed to have been Monk's screenplay based on his experiences. The producer, Wiley, likes the screenplay but asks Monk to change the ending. Monk eventually suggests one where police, believing Monk to be a wanted criminal, shoot him at the ceremony. Wiley loves it, and the film moves into production. So, this is another moment which seems to suggest there's something meta going on. Because obviously it's revealed that the film is actually the film that Monk is proposing.
Yeah.
The thing is, the whole time I'm basically agreeing with you, and that I feel like this film does not feel smart enough to actually have a meta thing going on.
No, yeah.
But at the same time, there are moments this is obviously literally meta.
Well, maybe the meta moment is what actually happened at the end, with him driving off wasn't interesting. So it's... So ideally, if you were to make this movie better, it's fiction. It would be fiction. Well, yeah, it would be fiction. Of course, this is fiction, but yeah, the point is comparing it to the movie. Monk's oh no, this is actually what happened. No, that's not interesting. It has to be made up. And the meta aspect is okay. Well, maybe Cord Jefferson said something to these executives about him just driving off or him giving a speech, and it's not that dramatic. And then they're like, no, we need something more dramatic at the end. Maybe he gets back with Coraline. Or maybe the white executives pitch this to him fucking Monk gets shot by the police, and that's what sells the movie. And he's like, I'll use that in the actual movie, and do a meta thing. But I don't know if that's the case at all. But that's the only way I could see it being meta. But yeah, the point is, again, the black guy gets shot by the cops at the end of this movie, and that's what sells the movie. That's why the producer, is excited. Even Monk gets shot. That's how it has to end. Yeah.
Yep. So, speaking of end...
we're done. So, I'll just conclude quickly. I gave this... what did I give this? I gave this a 5 out of 10.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, because I think it's quite bad for an Oscar-nominated movie, for a movie which won the screenplay. What fucking hell. It's an awful screenplay, really, considering, what it was up against. So, yeah, it's averaged far too on the nose. The tone is off. 5 out of 10.
Yeah, I actually gave it a high 5. There are nuances to why I rated it slightly higher, but they're not worth expounding.
Okay, that's great. So let's go through
our rankings
for the 2024 Oscars. So of course there was 10 movies nominated for Best Picture. We have now reviewed all of them. So what was your 10th movie, Michael? And what did you give out of
bottom
10?
Place. Okay, yeah. Killers of the Flower Moon, a high 3.
Now Maestro for me, which was a 4.5.
Yes.
What about your 9th?
So my Maestro with a high 5.
Yeah.
Which again, I'm surprised. I do remember why I gave it a high 5. I was like, I was very nice to that film.
American Fiction gets a 5 from me.
Yes.
And it's my 9th. What about your 8th?
American Fiction is my 8th.
Okay, so Barbie is my 8th with a 5.5.
And The Holdovers is my 6th.
You mean your 7th?
Oh god, I'm really struggling with
why are you so retarded,
counting backwards in numbers.
Yeah, so my 7th is Poor Things, which I gave a 7.
Cool. Now, okay, the next one's a bit meaningless because I'll be honest, all these other movies I've watched again, except Oppenheimer. I gave Oppenheimer a middling 7. I've ranked it in 6th place.
In 6th place. So Oppenheimer is 6th for you.
Yes.
I have the Holdovers in 6th with a 7.5.
Yes.
5th for me is Past Lives with an 8.
5th for me is Barbie with a middling 7. I give a lot of these films a middling 7.
Yeah, can't get off the fence. 4th for me is Killers of the Flower Moon with an 8.5. So that's the biggest difference, yeah.
Yeah, so 4th for me is Anatomy of a Fool with a middling 7. That's the last one.
That's crazy you give Anatomy of a Fool that fucking hell. Even crazier than the Killers of the Flower Moon one. 3rd for me is The Zone of Interest with a 9.
Poor Things, high 7.
Yeah. So Anatomy of a Fall is 2nd for me with a 9. So I gave it that and The Zone of Interest both a 9, but I put Anatomy of a Fall slightly higher. I liked it a bit more.
And now it's time for the real controversy.
What was 2nd for you?
Oh, Past Lives, sorry, with a low 8.
Great, I remember that. So you had Past Lives 2nd. Okay, wow.
Yes.
And so 1st for you?
Zone of Interest.
1st for me was Oppenheimer.
Yes.
About a Jewish guy who did something good. rather than
Yes.
I didn't want to put a movie where Jewish people just die. No, well, I say good. He actually fucked up, but his achievement was great. But obviously, he shouldn't have done that. That's the whole point of the movie. Anyway, let us now, talk about what we're doing next time. We don't know.
Yeah, we have no idea because we've got to wait for because those damn fires.
Yeah, it'll probably be the Dune 2. Yeah.
Yes.
Because we're going to be doing the Oscar nominations for 2025, the Best Picture nominations, of course. So join us for that. Who have you been, Michael?
I've been Michael.
I've been Luke. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.
Goodbye.